Good day, everyone. My name is Natasha Heyman from Cohesive's marketing team. I will be assisting the webinar today as your moderator. Let's get started with a few administrative tasks. Note that the webinar will be recorded and distributed post the session. All attendees are currently set to listen-only mode, but you can post any questions or comments in either the chat or the Q&A section in the panel. Should you have any technical questions or concerns, please log this with the GoToWebinar technical team on your help section or the icon with a question mark on it. We will also be sharing the PDF version of today's presentation. On that note, let me take a minute to introduce you to the speakers that will be taking you through today's webinar, PFI Handback, the importance of data. First up is Ian Blackman, Special Projects Director at Cohesive, who brings over 30 years of experience in PFI and design and build infrastructure across diverse sectors including healthcare, education, residential, commercial, airports, and highways. Clients of Cohesive value his input to distill complex information into practical, high-volume solutions. Then up is Dr. Victoria Fillingham, Senior Digital Transformation Consultant at Cohesive, who is an integrated project delivery specialist with over a decade of experience in architecture and environmental engineering. Victoria specializes in whole life carbon information management and leads Cohesive's ESDG community of practice globally. Over to the two of you for today's webinar.
Thank you, Natasha, and good afternoon, everybody. So during webinar one, we discussed digital estates in the context of hospitals. On today's webinar, we'll be discussing the handback journey, considering the PFI handback, but also reflecting on the PFI code's handback from the construction to the operation. Looking forward, we're going to discuss the need to understand future operating models and the handback challenges. And the final part of today's webinar will be focused on the need to start now to prepare for the future handback and how the PFI readiness assessment that we've developed can assist trusts and PFI codes to understand where they currently are and where they need to be for effective handback. So I'm going to open this first section reflecting on how handbacks have changed over the last 25 years. So we discussed this slide, the handback program during webinar one. Provides context into the breadth of the overall program, and we were discussing the importance of understanding the IPA expiry health checks, which happens 7, 5, and 3 years before the handback. Over the life of those 25 years, working practices have significantly changed. However, it's really important to note that the genesis of the handover information that trusts will likely receive as part of the handback process started with the handback or the handover information provided internally within the PFI code between the construction and the operation teams. So what did that actually look like 25 years ago? Handovers are typically between construction and operations teams, comprise a delivery van arriving with a large number of hopefully marked, sometimes unmarked boxes containing lots of lever arch files, books of drawings and DVDs. And this required many hours from the operations or the asset management teams to gather all the data that's needed to operate the asset and put into their financial management systems, facilities management systems, and enter it manually. Very long, laborious process. And the format of this information also makes it very challenging to update over the life of the asset. But given the likelihood of what's happened, and Victoria's going to discuss this a bit further, that information would definitely need to have some updates over the life of the asset. And a lot has changed in the last 25 years as well. Technology has dramatically changed. The inside graphic on the right-hand side of this slide runs from 1988 to 2013. A little bit old now, but it really shows the pace of change. And I've annotated on this graphic where PFI handovers from construction to operation sort of were typically happening. And at that time, Windows 95 was the norm, and DVDs had been launched in 1995, and we were starting to hand over information on DVDs. Before that, it was a huge stack of CDRs, discs. As a design manager at the time, working from designer's office on PFI contracts, I remember having to use dial-up internet, and we were sending design documentation to site almost every day by overnight courier. That was just how it was done in those days. And in closing PFI deals as well, same time period, we were typically asked for 5 copies of each document, requiring multiple lever arch files delivered in a very large removal van. I'd look back to my back catalogue to show you what one looked like, but unfortunately I can't find it. Better information management practice needed. The chart to the left shows the growth of global data, which is hugely exponential, and most of those handbacks that you started from the PFI construction into operation is at the start of that chart. So during the life of that operation, globally, how we use data and our expectations of what is going to be available and how we can use it across multiple aspects has changed significantly. And part of the unknown is, the trust. So the PFI co's journey over the 25 years of how they've moved and modified how they do what they're delivering their service, how they store the data, how they manage it, how they update it. It was down to them as part of providing that service. So part of there's an awful lot of unknowns that need to be unpacked. So what I was describing previously was very much a hard landing, where you had to manually find all that data. Typically now we talk about soft landings. And it's part of and part of that is the digital handover. And soft landings, dates back to 2009, introduced by Bizia and UBT. The government's construction strategy of 2011, really saw soft landings as a serious, really important components of it. And they launched government soft landings in 2016, and a lot of it was about that seamless transition of asset data, and the graphic you see on the screen was developed by one of my colleagues who wrote the government sort of specification for the MCDA, still available on the Centre of Digital Britain Cambridge website. I'd advocate a reading of it if you're not familiar with what an MCDA looks like. But it was all designed to take that digital handover from construction teams and into operation and maintenance. Now, that might have been done by the client, can be done by the client saying contractor has to put that information in, but it's a digital handover. None of that scrolling through files, trying to find that information or data, or frankly resurveying the estate right at the beginning of an operation to gather the right information to sort of run and operate those maintainable assets. Again, back in webinar 1, Dave Philp was talking about the characteristics of a digital estate, and reflected on the sort of differences on how information was structured and delivered as PFI projects have transitioned from construction to operation. What is now expected in good practice, they could very massively or potentially is available in terms of that data information. Characteristics of that digital estate, as I was discussed in webinar 1, but the concept of purpose, trust, and function are really important, and really can't stress that enough. That moving through the handback process of understanding what that looks like, and potentially how at this stage you're going to have to move from an analog way of working into a future digital way of working. So Victoria's going to explore that aspect a little bit further now.
Thanks, Ian. So we've spoken about the journey to date, but now I think it's important to think about what that looks like next and what we specifically need to focus on next. And the NHS has set its sights on a vision for the future that is an ecosystem of the most digitally advanced and integrated hospitals in the world. utilising digital twin technologies to have that holistic representation of both the clinical and the operational performance of those facilities, of those hospitals, which provides the means to ensure that the NHS has a more resilient infrastructure for the future. And the New Hospital Programme, the NHP, is a driving force for that journey to the future, journey to the digital hospital. But the challenge of this future state is understanding what it means for us here and now and how we can best set up for success. And to do this, we believe there are 3 core areas to focus on. The first, organisation. It's really digging into what that ambition for the future looks like at the local level. So at a hospital specific level, what does that future look like for the hospital team? And once defined, that can really help to define the operating model, but also the relationships that will help enable each stage of handback and beyond. Next, access to data that is usable and trusted is an immediate challenge that could make or break the handback of assets. Data, if structured in known locations, can drive immediate decision making, but as Ian's already expressed, quite a lot of that data is stored in analog forms and not necessarily known in terms of the location, but also the structure, the level of detail that's in that. And that could really impact the immediate decision making and the efficiency going forward. So we need to understand the state so that you can maximise the soft landings handover approach. And the third element is technology. Now, technology has changed quite considerably over the last 25 years, with even more change on the horizon, moving towards digital twins and beyond. So breaking down the toolings that we used throughout that 25-year period with respect to what the capabilities were, but also the supporting documentation, can really aid that transition into the future. So you need to simultaneously consider each of these 3 areas so that you can drive towards informed twins and beyond. But breaking that down even further, thinking about that future operating model, what do we need to consider? The first question that we pose is, how will digital estates form an integral part of that future hospital? Will the estates team sit as part of that digital vision? Would it sit separate? Would it sit side by side? And what does that mean in terms of the relationships? But also, does the estates team have capabilities in order to establish that digital future? And how can that be maintained throughout that handback process? And if the internal capability has that understanding of that future digital ambition, what's lacking, what's there, the gaps need to be understood. And if they don't have the drive or the ambition to own that part, does the supply chain, up to the other capabilities within the supply chain, ready for enterprise asset management? And the last question, taking all of those preceding ones into consideration, is understanding the commercial position. Is there a strategy that is already in place? If not, that's something that should be focused on. And if there is one in place, does that consider the future operating model to the level of detail that's required? The next element is thinking about handover. Now, over the course of an estate's life, from the first day of scoping the design through construction into handover, information was being created, and the project information was locked at the point of handover. This should have aided, hopefully should have aided, the development of asset information for use during operations and maintenance. But also during the operation phase, the volume of O&M information continues to grow. It's not steady state. There is continually information that's created. So that should be combined with the existing asset registries. So thinking about the point of change, the retrofits, the renewals, the recalibrations of those assets of the facilities, combined with the existing asset information store to give that true operational efficiency vision, that view of the vital insights into the asset and how it's performing. Without access to this information, if it remains locked in the supply chain systems, in files and cabinets and cupboards, this will potentially hinder the level of insight that can be gained, and also make the point of handover into a handback much more complicated. So this leads to 2 further questions that we have, is whether the assessment is being undertaken in terms of the structure of the asset data, the estate's data, and also the access to that data. Is it available? Is it trusted? Is it structured or unstructured? things to consider. I'll hand back to Ian to talk through the readiness assessment framework.
Thank you, Victoria. So recognising the challenges that we discussed and recognising how busy trusts are with their day-to-day operations, it can be quite daunting of where to start or how to even start approaching this. So to help trusts, we're coming to market with a rapid assessment, data readiness assessment tool. It's our offering designed to ease that burden on your teams as you prepare for and assume responsibility for operating, maintaining the key assets moving forward, or potentially, as Victoria was talking about the commercial model, you may be choosing to continue to outsource, but even in moving to continue to outsource, that data needs to flow from the PFI code to yourselves and pass it on. And if you want to sort of adopt that, it is really important to remember that you're over 25 years, you've not had to deal with it. But on an outsourced model, on a sort of operation maintenance, you're looking at more like another handback coming in 5 to 7 years. So part of even thinking through strategies at this stage, it may be that you may accept you're not going to get great quality of data. The supply chain is going to have to, the next supplier is going to have to fill gaps, but also be very mindful that you can be stipulating at this stage that what the data that they capture or they produce, they curate during the life of their contract does come back as a digital handover at the next point. So you can either take it back in-house or then pass it on to the next provider. So that's really important. I just want to make that connection to what Victoria was talking about. But back to our readiness assessment, the output from doing it will be rapidly equip you with the intelligence you need to working with aspects, bringing extensive knowledge from our sort of whole asset lifecycle, but particularly our built asset information management practices, and even teams of people from enterprise asset management expertise within our business. So what does it comprise? The readiness assessment is designed to be conducted over a 2-day period on site. So there's a lot of preparation work to make that as effective as possible and really taking consciousness of availability of people. But what we want to do is really, and again, acknowledging that a lot of the data could be buried in systems, could be buried in documents. That's why we need to be on site. But the idea is, we capture detailed information to answer the key questions of regarding the asset information completeness, its format, its reliability, really digging in and finding some recent or even a few years ago where you've done an asset renewal program. Do we see evidence that handover information, the health and safety file, the operation and maintenance manuals, the structured asset data, is it being kept up to date? So this can also help, as well as helping you understand where you are as a trust, also provide useful feedback and input into your IPA expiry health checks that will, again, you're doing it 5, 7, 3 years out. So in doing this exercise, we'll provide a comprehensive route to ensure that answers to key questions can be provided, such as how will the estate and asset managed be post-handback? What are the data and information requirements within the project agreement? To then validate, are you seeing that being made available? How is the existing data structured? What does it contain? Does it contain medical equipment and plant? How would that provide in a potentially future digital hospital version in the future to be considered? Is there evidence to support the data is being kept up to date? What are the technologies being used by the PFI code for asset management? And in something that can, one, understand how you might be able to export that data, or two, is that a system that the trust may wish to try and negotiate with the PFI code to transition across, to again reduce the burden of that transition. So the 2 days, what does it look like? We spend a lot of time one-to-one meetings with teams, drilling through the information, and documenting it. And the output is looking at the radar diagram on the screen. We've got a number of lenses that we're looking at, and we get a score of where you currently are and where you need to be. As we collect and produce more data, we also be able to help and show where are other trusts in the same journey. But alongside that, we then give you a clear action plan as to how do you move from where you are to where you need to be. And this is about being very short, succinct, to the point, plain language, to help you have a very clear picture of where you are and how to move forward in a timely manner. Just to in advance of that, and in advance of our next webinar, to give you a flavour of what that rapid assessment sort of partly looks like, we created a much simplified version of it in a sort of this online form. We provide a link to the form and in the QR code on the screen, and we invite you to sort of maybe have a participate in that link. And sure, Natasha, we can ping that link out as well through our comms channels to invite people to participate. And it is, again, it's prompting those similar sort of base sets of questions. We're inviting you to sort of provide a score, and it'd be quite, be good to gather that sort of data. And we can really sort of, Victoria and I can talk through that and what we're seeing, from not just from our own anecdotal evidence, but from what trusts are saying in terms of what is the current situation, where are the areas of challenges, and where is the level of maturity at this stage. And really just dwelling on the sort of what we're trying to do with this exercise. This is not trying to say everyone has to fit to a unified model. It is very much about helping a trust know where it needs to be, where it wants to be. Setting the trust being very empowered and saying, well, our digital ambition is at this point here. That's fine. Obviously, there may be some consequences to that we just help the trust understand for us as it moves forward. But a lot of, I think, taking that PFI Handback, the most important thing is doing the basics well to enable to get that baseline of structured information and data in a place that is managed, it's trusted, and then you can grow and expand from it. It's not about big digital change at that handback. The handback's as complicated as enough as it is, but it's making sure that it gives you a solid foundation to move on from. So I'm going to hand back now to Natasha, please.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you both, Victoria and Ian, for today's webinar. As Ian mentioned, we have one additional webinar session in this series coming up on the 18th of July, where we will enable you and your healthcare estate to go through the necessary digital transition. As Ian mentioned, it might be a tad bit of a complicated process, but we can help you and guide you through this in terms of getting the basics right. You can also watch the first webinar directly on our YouTube channel by scanning this QR code. Be sure to also follow Cohesive and on our LinkedIn, and be on the lookout for our additional blog posts, articles, and more information regarding the digital strategies and specifically advice and guidance on the PFI Handback transition process. We'll be sharing quite a lot of details on our website and a lot more information. But I want to thank all of you for joining us today in our jam-packed 30-minute session. Be sure to reach out to either Victoria or Ian for any questions, or head over to our website for all the additional information. Thank you, and I wish you all a great day further. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
You.
Bye.